Yo, what is going on, guys? Matthew V. Haynes here, aka The Clockmaster. Today we're going to be doing a spoiler-free review of Blade Runner 2049. But before I get into that, as usual, guys, please make sure if you are new to the channel to please subscribe for more movie reviews, movie news updates, and a lot of content just like this. If you're new to the channel, you don't want to miss it. This is the place to be. Subscribe now. Plus, it's free though. So, guys, I'm going to just jump straight into this thing. This review is going to be I did write some notes and some pointers here, so if you see me looking over across the screen a couple times, just know that I did write a couple of things down. I don't want to lose track because there's a lot to talk about in this movie, but for the spoiler free, I had to really write some things down because to avoid spoilers. So first thing I can tell you, if you have not seen the movie before this one, the original Blade Runner directed by Ridley Scott that came out in 1982, you need to go watch it. There's like 8 copies of that film, and it's like really scattered. So there's two main films, two main versions of the film that people debate as to which one you should actually watch if it's your first time watching Blade Runner. There's Blade Runner, the final cut, which was released in 2007. It's the closest to Ridley Scott's vision we can ever see. And then there's the theatrical version, which came out originally in 1982. And the main key differences between the two is just the way how the pacing of the film, the entire feel of the film, and different endings, because Ridley Scott had a different ending compared to what the big head honchos over at the production company wanted for the original theatrical release. So you could either make a decision. I personally have not seen the first 2 films until a day before watching Blade Runner 2049. I watched the final cut version and I watched the theatrical version just so I can get a better understanding of what I'm getting myself into, and I was able to understand the original. So like I'm saying, if you're new to this entire story, you definitely need to check it out, because Blade Runner 2049 takes place 30 years after the events that happened in the original Blade Runner, and it answers a couple of questions that was left unanswered in the first movie, and then kind of continues or creates its own story to propel to something else. So just to let you guys know. And yes, I've been getting this question a lot too. It is a rated R film. Nothing too crazy. Brief nudity, little types of nudity and stuff like that, but nothing Game of Thrones crazy or anything like that. Nothing to word. But I get a lot of questions like this. People always ask me, why did you ever tell me the the ratings of the movies? It is a rated R film, just in case you just didn't know that for any reason. So it is rated R. So just be mindful of that. So overall, guys, I really love this film. The fact that because I love the original, I really love the original movie. I really enjoy, I love every aspect of the original, just the entire concept and everything behind the original film. That whole neo-noir vibe they had, the true detective style type of video, type of movie, and Harrison Ford really selling his, doing the best Harrison Ford he can do in that movie. I really enjoyed the original, and this one, you can't really compare this movie to the original because it's not supposed to be compared to it. It's supposed to be a sequel, technically, not necessarily a reboot, but a sequel. So it is its own thing, but it does take a lot of elements, especially from the final cut version of Blade Runner. The final cut version of Blade Runner, actually, it kind of sets a tone for the dystopian style that they were going for, and it's compared to the theatrical release. It's a lot of the moments are very empty, and you have to absorb the world. And this movie, if you were to watch and you want something close to in feel, this movie is actually closer to the feel of Blade Runner: The Final Cut, except to the theatrical release. But it was good. This movie took me on a lot of emotional journeys throughout the entire film. It just had me questioning. It was very puzzling, and it was well written, and I'm going to get into my positives and my negatives and stuff, but it was well written. The structure was pretty. It was really, really good. Right now, I think it's sitting at a 90% Rotten Tomatoes at the time of this video, and that's kind of what I'm giving it, but I'll talk a little bit more about my score at the end of this video, so stick around for that. So this movie takes place 30 years after the events of the first Blade Runner movie, and we have a new Blade Runner here played by Ryan Gosling, Officer K, who discovers a whole bunch of things that can either propel everything into the future for this world and for this time period, and answer some questions from the past. That's as much as I'll get into as far as the plot is concerned, because there's a whole thrill ride with this plot, and you really need to pay attention to what you're going to watch, because there's a lot of surprises and fun goodies and a lot of Easter eggs in this entire movie. So the movie stars Harrison Ford, Ryan Gosling, Robin Wright, Sylvia Hoeks, and Jared Leto. And I'm not going to go too much into all the cast members because there's a lot of them. There's a little cameo, little appearance from Dave Bautista, which was pretty cool, but I'm not going to list everybody because it's a lot. Alright guys, so let's get into some of my positives. Now, like I mentioned this earlier, some of my positives about this movie is the writing. I really loved how this movie was written, and there was little to no dialogue for a lot. Well, there was dialogue, but there was very little dialogue between some of the cast members, especially coming from Ryan Gosling. You had to rely on a lot of, just emotional expression with your face and your eyes and just different things, and not so much talking. It does a really good job. The structure and foundation of this film is spectacular. I gotta say that, at least. The story and the writing, everything makes sense. It makes sense, and it connects to a lot of things in the original film. And in this one, it just really it's the icing on the cake. It just follows a specific pattern, and then it just twists you up and it messes your mind around. And especially if you watch the original ones, and it really takes you on a thrill ride. I found myself leaving the theater just like so confused about how I truly felt, because I had such mixed emotions. And rarely a movie can do that to me, where I feel these mixed feelings with things. Not so many movies can do that to me, and this movie definitely did that to me. Another big positive I have is the CGI on this film, the CGI and the set design. Now, from the original Blade Runner, they had an amazing set and an amazing concept for what a dystopian neo-noir future, what they believe would look like, because it was made in 1982, and they were depicting what they think the world would look like in 2019, and it's nothing close to what they imagined, but just the whole concept behind it. And keep in mind that's the craze of science fiction. The one of the movies that really got this whole sci-fi thing, this sci-fi trend. It definitely got a lot of praise in the 80s. From when I was doing my research, a lot of people really talk a lot about Blade Runner, and after watching the movie myself, the original, I was like, yes, definitely. But what this new movie does, Blade Runner 2049, is it really takes those elements and those concepts from the first movie and really builds upon it and expands the world. Even though it's centered in the same Los Angeles, centered in the same area, you got to see a different part of that you would not have been able to see in the original due to the lack of resources that they had back then for visual design and stuff like that. They relied on a lot of practical effects and a lot of practical things. And in the new movies, of course, they have the CGI and stuff like that, more digital things, so they can do a lot more with the world, expand on a lot of things. And I gotta say, CGI was clean. There's a lot of shockers in this movie that it involved CGI, and it worked very, very, very well. And there was moments where you're like, yeah, I know it's CGI, but you can tell, but just the fact that they can get away with a lot of this stuff now, it's super, super scary. There was also a really cool hologram thing. I'm not going to go into specifics with the movie, and it worked seamlessly. It looked so super, super real. I felt like I was actually in this world, and that it's believable. It makes sense. It didn't look gimmicky. It didn't look fake, and I wanted to be there. I could understand what was going on. I could understand the whole feeling, the tone, and everything. It had that specific vibe towards, and that's all because of the set design, CGI, and design work and decorative stuff like that. Costume design, all that stuff was completely on par with this movie, and it really worked. Now, this brings me on another thing I really enjoyed about this film, and that's the acting. Ryan Gosling does a very good job. I don't want to spoil too much with the movie. I'm really trying my best not to, but he does a very good job with his role. He tells a lot of stories with just his eyes. There's a lot of moments where he does not speak at all, and it's just the emotions or the lack thereof, and him just doing different things, movements, twitches, things like that. It just worked very seamlessly, and you can understand what he was communicating with you. You kind of had a vibe with the Final Cut version where Harrison Ford, because in the theatrical version, Harrison Ford did a lot of narrative stuff on top of his acting, and for the most part, it didn't work. It helped provide more depth of the character, so you understood what was going on. But in the Final Cut version, you had none of that narrative, you had none of that stuff behind it, and you had to rely on just what the actor was able to portray with their eyes, with their face, with their whole body body language, all of that stuff was worked, and Ryan Gosling really did a good job of embodying all of those aspects of communicating without having to actually use your words. Another thing I really enjoyed about this movie too is the soundtrack. The overall soundtrack on this movie was great, and of course I'm gonna love it because it's by my boy, one of my favorite composers, Hans Zimmer, and also I keep forgetting his name, but I like this guy, Benjamin Wallfisch. I can't pronounce his name. He did the It 2017 soundtrack, and I enjoy the It 2017 soundtrack. So to have the two of them working on this film together with the soundtrack was really great. And the thing about it is not your typical Hans Zimmer approach. Ever since he left recording superhero music and superhero soundtracks, his style has, I would say, has really evolved, and he has evolved as an artist. This soundtrack relies on a lot of ambient sounds, a lot of experimental things, just a lot of synthesizers, which is replicating, no pun intended, with the original movies that worked and drived off of synthesizers, which I keep forgetting his name again, but V, the composer for the original movie, did a really good job. And one of the things that I loved about what Hans Zimmer has been doing recently with his music, and he does this a lot throughout his soundtracks, and he uses this a lot heavily on the Dunkirk soundtrack, is something that you like to call a shepherd tone. Now, shepherd tone, I'm not the best at explaining what it is, even though I am a musician. I actually only recently learned about a shepherd's tone not too long ago. But basically, it takes a set of notes, and it just goes chromatically up and gradually increases the volume, and then once it reaches to the very top last octave of that note, it kind of recycles the process over again, and it just keeps building and building up on each other, so it sounds like the tone and the sound is actually really gradually increasing, and it's just going high, 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 and it has no limit, and it's stopping, but really it's just repeating itself. But Hans Zimmer utilizes this in one specific scene of this movie, and I was just smiling from cheek to cheek, because I'm like, that's my boy. That's Hans Zimmer right there, and it's working, and it really helped build the intensity of that scene, just using that shepherd tone. It was used in such a great, spectacular way. I could not, and just the whole collab working with Benjamin, I think, I don't know exactly the production as to how it happened, but just to know that both of them had some type of involvement with the soundtrack, and the score for this film was great. So I really enjoyed the score and the soundtrack for this movie. I mean, nothing to me really beats that nice noir detective theme song, the love theme from the Blade Runner original movie, which was amazing. It's actually one of my recent favorites right now for soundtracks, is the love theme from the original Blade Runner movie, which I really loved a lot. But nonetheless, guys, this soundtrack is definitely one for the books, man, and it really complemented the entire film. It helped tell the story in such a great way, and if, like I preach this all the time, if the soundtrack is not good, it defeats the purpose of the movie, man. And if you can rely on just a lot of ambient sounds and not too much crazy horns and violins and synths and crazy, backups and heavy drums, which Hans Zimmer is very known for, the lack of that, and just, replacing it with other things, and just it still works. It's, to me, that's just phenomenal. So great job to him and his team and everyone who worked on this soundtrack. And I think a lot of the character moments worked. There was a few moments where it didn't work, but a lot of the character moments, for the most part, actually really worked. Some characters had good development, some other characters not so much. And that's going to bring me into some of my negatives, and that's going to be one of my next negatives, is the pacing of this film. So I gotta say, for negatives, the pacing is very slow, and some points it really dragged on way more and way too much more than it was actually supposed to drag. And I gotta say this, man. If you watch the Final Cut version, it's very similar to that as far as pacing is concerned. But what that allows you to do is that it allows you to really absorb a lot of the other things that are going on in that specific scene. So, like, maybe it's one of the cars flying around the place, or maybe a leaf, or maybe a building, or some of the street signs and some of the things. It makes you absorb the rest of that world, and you can take it all in. So, I mean, I guess that's where the slow parts would work. But I gotta say, if you're not a really good patient person, and you go at a specific time of the day, this movie will make you feel like you want to kind of sleep a little bit at certain points. However, there was a lot of cool action sequences that worked with it, that it was able to make up for it, but there were really certain parts of the movie that were kind of slow, but for the most part it pretty much worked okay. And as far as the antagonist is concerned, that's another one of my big negatives here. There was not so much big development with the antagonist, in my opinion. Of course, Jared Leto, who does a great job regardless of whatever he's playing, whatever character he's playing, normally does a great job, but for some reason the development with him in this movie was just kind of like, I don't know. It's like you're supposed to be threatened, and it kind of makes you question. I don't know if it was intentional by these guys, but it kind of makes you question who the true antagonist is. Is it this person? Is it this person? Is it that person? Who is it? It makes you question all of that. But I just found his character development was kind of non-existent to me. He was super mysterious, and the way how the movie ends is that they can actually explore this in another movie, maybe Blade Runner 2050. I don't know, but they can actually explore that in another movie. So that's just the way how it ends. Maybe we'll learn more about him later, but he's just such a mysterious character, and I'm guessing maybe that's what they were going for. But other than that, guys, I don't really have too much strong negatives. I'm going to go watch this movie again before I do my spoiler review, so I'm probably going to go sometime tomorrow and watch, or at the time you're watching this video, I'm probably going to go again before I do my spoiler review, because there's a lot to absorb in this movie and really talk about concerning this film. It's just so much questions I have, and so much questions that still went unanswered in this film. Anyways, guys, that goes it for my Blade Runner 2049 review, guys. I'm going to give this movie a strong 9 out of 10, and I'm going to give it probably a 90% out of 100, man. Like I said, I really enjoyed a lot of the moments and a lot of the elements that I've listed in this movie. I had a great time watching it, and there was a guy next to me. He was getting all emotional too, and I was getting emotional, and we were like, so it was a good moment. Not too many people there. You can tell that it was opening night, the day before opening night actually, and you can just tell it was actually hardcore Blade Runner fans in that theater. It was a small group. Big theater, but a small group. But nonetheless, man, I really enjoyed this movie, guys. If you have not seen the original, definitely check it out before you watch this. It's such a great film. The story is great, and it continues with some great characters, man. All right, guys, thank you so much. I will see you guys in the next video. Don't forget to check out the comment section down below. Leave your comments down below and your thoughts on this movie, spoiler free, of course. Don't forget to check out my description box. All the information and P.O Box unboxing and stuff like that is in the description box below. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Clockmaster out. Yo, thank you guys for watching this video. If you are new to the channel, please do not forget to subscribe by pressing that button right over there. And if you want to help support the channel financially, go ahead and visit my Patreon page by clicking that button over there. And don't forget to check out these brand new videos down below.